Okay, back for number 2. Greetings, this is CREE, which is an acronym that stands for Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer. And this is the second broadcast. This one, the one earlier today was a premiere. It was pre-recorded. This is live. It's 6:30 p.m. here on the West Coast and 9:30 on the East Coast, and back it up 1 hour for Central. I don't know how long we'll go. We'll see who shows up. And, if someone shows up and we can have a meaningful conversation about what's going on in regard to black people and COVID-19, whether that's emotional issues, financial issues, physical issues, whatever. We can even go the 9 standard categories the way that Neely Fuller differentiates them, delineates them: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Any of that as it relates to COVID-19 or a closely related topic. I'm here. So the call-in number is on the screen, 760-249-2068. And, we can talk. I'm not in a mood to do a monologue. I've already done that. I did that, finished it up last night. So this one here, I can probably get the conversation started. I have conversation starters, and if it just doesn't start a conversation, it just doesn't. So I had already, in the one that premiered today, talked about the air traffic that's going to Nigeria and Kenya, and how it is above many of the European countries and Middle Eastern countries that have way greater rates of infection and deaths from whatever is being called COVID-19, which hasn't really demonstrated itself to be a thing despite the pronouncements of official government persons. I don't see a number of excess deaths. The thing is, they haven't coordinated. See, this is how I know it's not a cabal conspiracy, because they haven't coordinated all their data to match their story. So if that was what they were going to do, they would have had to coordinate all their data, and even just the most basic data is not corroborating. So we don't see excess deaths. Forget about from COVID-19. We don't see excess death from all causes. There's just no evidence that there are more people dying from anything. So if there's no evidence that more people are dying from anything in the United States, according to the statistics, how can we say that there's this mad, contagious disease that's killing all these people in a way that's so scary that we've never seen before? I mean, I just don't see it. But it is being used for political ends for any number of people. Power grabs and the always synchronized anti-black activity. But what I was not aware of, because I had my head down finishing the production of the video that premiered yesterday, was I was not aware. I know that Donald Trump comes on every day, basically, and does a coronavirus COVID-19 White House briefing with Anthony Fauci and his cast of folk. But because I had my head down just doing the production of that, I didn't keep up with what he said yesterday. And yesterday's briefing was about about opening the country back up. And so rather than listen to a 3-hour or whatever, how long ago it was, I just went to the transcript. And the transcript was right in line with what I had said in the video I was recording. I mean, I didn't know he was saying these things, but I projected that this type of thing would... I just followed the logic. I projected that what Donald Trump said yesterday would happen. How he's saying it's gonna go forth. Like I said in the video that premiered today, I said, don't think white people are going to just keep doing this. They're not. What they're going to do is they're going to be doing smart quarantining, smart sequestering, and that's going to mean sequestering the people who are most tagged as being at risk for transmission. This is what I said in the one that I was recording that premiered today, and that's exactly what Donald Trump said. And I guess, I could do it like I told you so. Or we could talk about what we're going to do about it, I suppose. Let me look at my conference line and see if anybody has phoned in yet. If not, like I said, I'm just not in the mind to. I don't even see anybody typing anything. I'm just not in the mind to do a monologue. I'm burnt, you know. So what I can do before I sign off, and I might delete this, is show you what I see in Donald Trump's comments from yesterday. So let me just go into the studio and go into the PDFs. Show that. So let me scroll up. So I did read through the entire thing. Why is that doing that? Okay, so I did read through the entire thing, and I highlighted the portions that corroborate my projections of what would happen. I'm having a little bit of trouble here getting this thing to do what I wanted to do. Okay, maybe if you take your ego out of it, CREE, get your logo off of there, and try to scroll up that way. You know what? I just realized what I was doing. Okay, I'm a little stir crazy. I'm going to put my logo back on there. And I'm actually going to go to the PDFs. Yeah, not just the studio. And that will scroll up. Okay. All right, so this is some service called Rev, and they offer transcripts. I find that quite useful. It's a time saver because you can scan a lot faster than you can hear stuff. Sometimes you just want to passively listen. You don't feel like reading. But sometimes when I want to get information really fast, I prefer to just go to the transcript and read it. So, as we're scrolling, we will go until we see something yellow. Ah, there we go. And we'll see who was talking. It was probably our president. Yep, Donald Trump. At somewhere at 13:25, because I guess this is, if you go to YouTube and you look at the actual transcript, you'll be able to hear this at 13:25 on the video. So this is our president, Donald Trump's talking. He says every state is very different. Well, and let me develop it for you, because each thing that I highlighted is going to reinforce the other thing, and it'll reinforce what I was saying about the target is us. Every state is very different. They're all beautiful. We love them all, but they're very different. If they need to remain closed, we will allow them to do that. And if they believe it is time to reopen, we will provide them the freedom and guidance to accomplish that task, and very quickly, depending upon what they want to do. Doesn't sound bad so far, right? He says, we will continue to work with governors to advise them on how to conduct both, now it's starting to sound menacing, to conduct both surveillance and diagnostic testing. So like, I'm a black person, so you start talking about surveillance. I know that there are the libertarian white folks out there, non-black folks out there too, who don't like being surveilled and want their privacy and all of that. But I'm a black person, so, surveillance means a much more sinister thing to me than it even does to them, especially under these circumstances. Okay, so, I scroll through some more, and, I read, and, they're talking about, it is interesting, I didn't highlight this part, but now all of a sudden they're just trying to slip in, kind of like the way, I don't know what personality disorder does this, but I've known people who have denied a thing, and all of a sudden in some conversation they just slip it in as if they always have been saying it. So all of a sudden we see the word influenza-like illness. Well, what? Well, now you're talking about influenza. All along there have been people who've been saying that the influenza kills more people, or that this seems like the flu more than anything else. And it does match what Anthony Fauci said, in his paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, that the clinical manifestation of this will probably be something about like a seasonal flu. But this was denied. But now it's being slipped in as part of the official White House briefing, with Fauci standing right there. Okay, but that's not the part that directly, it does indirectly pertain to black people, because it gets to how you can use something phantom. If you have a phantom disease, then you can make it be whatever you want it to be. And if you want to use it for racist purposes, which of course, anything that exists, that's what they try to do, you can. So Again, these new guidelines for opening up America can be implemented on a statewide basis. Now here we start to go. Now we start to really, the plot thickens. These new guidelines for opening up America, again, can be implemented on a statewide basis or on a county by county basis. We know that the United States of America is still what they call highly segregated. We know there are counties that are heavily black and those that are not. So this isn't going to you just think, oh, this is about whether or not a state's going to open up. This is about how a state's going to be surveilled. No, they're going to be very surgical. So they're talking about county by county. They're really talking about honing in as we go further in this document. They're talking about honing in on the areas where black people are concentrated, even though they don't say that. But we'll see that, there are certain words, just like, when they use the word thug, they're talking about black people. If they use the word urban or inner city, they're talking about black people, right? Disadvantaged, it usually means us. But usually that one is used to dilute whatever's meant to go to black Americans, the descendants of slavery, and go to just anybody. But I digress. Again, now this is Dr. Birx. This is not President Trump. He says, again, housed at the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and really, here we go again, is our surveillance program that can be utilized for a lot of different illnesses, but in this case, will be used for respiratory diseases. Again, now it's a broad category. So this is just what I was talking about in the video that just played a couple hours ago. Respiratory diseases. COVID, so basically what we're seeing is respiratory diseases. There are a lot of respiratory diseases. It's just, they've always been. It's just now you're coding them as COVID-19, this new disease. But they didn't do that before. Okay. Scrolling along. And they're even saying that, they were tracking. So they're tracking the data. And they were tracking data in emergency rooms. And they were saying that there was early respiratory disease. And that you can see that the early respiratory diseases predated what they're calling the COVID cases. Yeah, there's always been respiratory disease. And by the way, black people have less than half the rate that white people have of this. So how we're getting tagged with what you're now admitting is this complex of different respiratory diseases that you are at your discretion tagging as COVID, and you're most inclined to do that when you're looking at a black person sitting in front of you with a blood pressure cuff on, right? And then you're going to say that it's related to the hypertension. And, gosh, you're a black person, you're going into a hospital with a bunch of non-black people around you. You probably already got hypertension, and because of the stress of being a black person in an anti-black world, then on top of it, you know that your life is in the hands of these people, and you don't even know that you're agitated, but your blood pressure will go up, and then, oh yeah, blood pressure, hypertension, that adds to the comorbidity, that adds to the chances that you'll get this phantom disease. Well, when you're talking about, you see, they're just picking stuff, right? So if you're talking about hypertension, a disproportionate number of black people, because of the system of racism, have hypertension. And you're claiming that somehow there's a relationship between that and the severity of illness that you get if you catch this phantom disease that you've made up. I'm sorry, I'm genuinely laughing, called COVID, because it's so horrible that it's funny. It's not really funny, but it's so horrible that it's funny. You know how we are as black people. Like a lot of humor is just, it's because it's some mechanism in the brain where you laugh to keep from crying. But there's a level of absurdity to it in the predictability and the malice, that sometimes it's just going to make you laugh. Because they're so predictable. And it's so thorough. They can be so thorough. Even when they're being haphazard, they still somehow manage to be thorough. They can be just haphazard, but they're throwing so many nets at it, so many anti-black nets at us that, it's very thorough. But they're saying this respiratory diseases predated they're tracking of it. A lot of it predated the COVID cases. Then they say it follows the syndromic. It's a syndrome now. This is so funny the way they just keep, again, I'm attuned when you start using words you hadn't used before. I know that you're working a plan on me. Following the syndromic pattern, city by city, county by county. County by county. And now we're not going to just go county by county because there can be some counties, right? So on the East Coast, counties can be very small and they can be concentrated by race. But like say, here in California, San Diego County is, I think, the second largest county in the state of California. It's a huge, by square area, it's a huge county. So that's not going to specifically hone in on Black people, but they go by further. They say community by community. Well, there you go. Because in San Diego County, for instance, they list on their official website the COVID cases and the COVID deaths, what they're calling COVID cases and COVID deaths by zip code. And if you live in San Diego, if you're a longtime resident, you know what zip codes Black people live in, right? So yeah, they're going to do it by community. And yes, there's this really high number proportionately in the zip code where Black people live, which is where I live. And I don't feel like telling you what that zip code is, but yeah. Let's see what else is next. We're going to talk about surveillance, setting up. Okay, now this really got my attention because this was capitalized, right? So this is something that is very organized. So they were giving a presentation and they had slides and so on. And so on the slide there was a bullet and they said it was about setting up something called Sentinel surveillance sites. And when I think of Sentinel, I think of the Matrix. The Sentinels that came out looking for the rebels on the Nebuchadnezzar, right? They were searching out the rebels, the people there, So that's what I think about. So I wanted to know what the Sentinel surveillance, I wanted to know what that was. But they say sites to be able to distinguish and find, look what they're looking for. Setting up the Sentinel surveillance sites to be able to distinguish and find asymptomatic individuals. So you ain't sick, but we're going to see if you're a problem anyway. Individuals that you've heard about, these asymptomatic people, that may be pre-symptomatic, meaning you're going to get sick. You're going to see symptoms. You just don't see them yet. That's another version of asymptomatic. Or asymptomatic, meaning you just throughout their entire disease course. If you're asymptomatic, how are you in the course of a disease? How can you be asymptomatic throughout the course of a disease? I've got a disease, but I never have any symptoms. But we want to find these people. Let's keep going. We're going to track them with cell phones. See if they've been in contact with people who we've thrown that COVID label on. See if here's the funny thing. They can do it and be truthful about it and still cover a whole lot of us. But you guys also have to understand that there's a whole lot of lying they can do too. There's a whole lot of deceit. They can say you've been in close proximity to someone who they've tagged with the label. There's just lying from beginning to end. They're lying about who's got it. They're lying about whether it's a disease. They're lying about whether or not there's any reason to believe that you have the disease. They can then lie about whether or not you've been in contact with such a person. They're lying about our greater susceptibility to getting sick from it. Just lying. The system of racism is built on the house of cards of lies. Well, that's most of the house. The foundation is the ability to perpetrate superior violence that holds us in place. So then this Dr. Burks goes on. He says, we want to be able to find them in communities of particular vulnerability. You know who they're talking about, right? Of course they have to throw in a few things. It's just like Surgeon General Jared Adams threw in, do it for your pop. And then he says abuela, which is, Spanish for grandmother. He's going to throw that in there. Let me see Oracle's in the house. Zip codes, exactly. Okay, yeah, because I can actually do this now. I can. What did you say, Oracle? Within those countries they have districts, places they have mapped out, and where black people are. Yeah, they're doing this all over the world. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Let me go back to reading this. Uh, so, just like Jared Adams, Surgeon General's Jared Adams threw in the abuela in there, it's just like they're going to throw in, well, it's just like they say, well, Latinos and blacks, put an X on that, or they'll say, black people and other economically disadvantaged. So in the COVID-19 thing, they're going to be talking about, they really are really getting at black people, really. But they'll throw in, people in nursing homes. It's a decoy. We want to be able to find them in communities of particular vulnerability. We know who they're talking about. So we will be doing, and I'm going to show you what sentinel surveillance is. I've got a PDF, as you can see up here. I went to find what that was, and I pulled that up. So we'll be doing sentinel surveillance throughout nursing homes. Yeah, not just take your mind off of the black people. Of course, now the non-black people have not taken their minds off. They never take their eye off the ball, right? But we might. And then they go on, after they've said the nursing homes, what do they say next? Throughout the inner city federal clinics. I'm probably doing more laughing than I've ever done in a broadcast, because it is because I just finished predicting this, because they're so predictable. It's not because I'm so smart. It is because I have a certain level of intelligence and I have a whole lot of experience, which I've been watching these people. They're just extremely predictable. It's like when you're sitting, after you've been driving for a number of years, you could be sitting in a light, especially if you've been driving certain areas, and you're not really paying attention. You have the radio going, or whatever you've got doing. We don't do radio anymore, but you got your music going. You could be talking to the person in the car with you. You could have your mind on anything, but when the light's going to turn green, because you've been at that light or light similar to it so many times that what your mind has already calculated when the light's going to turn green. You can just tell, one, by the amount of time number of times you've sat at that light. But you can also, there are other kind of cues, because lights turn green and turn red depending upon what opposing traffic is. And so your mind, you don't know it, but your mind is taking in all these other cues. And so you can apply it in any situation. This is what is happening with people who have a lot of experience watching how these people work against us. You just know what they're going to do. It's no magic thing. And this is why Black Americans pose the greatest threat, because we have been living here around them for over 400 years. It's not like black people in Africa that are just around other black people and they talk about colonialism. Yeah, but they don't know the finer points. They don't know how the deceit works. They don't know that they never take their eye off the ball no matter what they say. We have seen all the renditions. It's like if you follow a certain comedian, there's certain comedians that just crack me up. And by the way, judge me if you want to, but I have reasons for it. Very few of them are black. Almost all of the comedians that make me laugh until I'm about to fall over are white comedians. I would say the black comedian that made me laugh like that the most was Tommy Davidson, but he was raised by white folks. And at the very beginning of his career, Cedric the Entertainer would have me replaying, at the time, the VCR, or maybe it was a DVD at the time, over and over and over again. He gave me an ab workout. But the reason that I probably should explain, the reason that black comics don't really make me laugh that hard usually, like Dave Chappelle, he leaves me cold. But the other kinds of the black comics, they do a lot of covering for racism. That's a lot of their comedy. It's not particularly insightful. It's just, it has a lot of vulgarity in it. And I think that the reason it has a lot of vulgarity in it is to cover for the elephant in the room, which is that anytime a black person is anywhere and they have a mic, the thing we should always be talking about on the mic that they're afraid of is racism. And so if you're not going to talk about racism, what are you going to talk about that's going to get everybody's attention? Sex. And then to the extent that they talk about racism, it is in the way that is most palatable to non-black people. And so it just doesn't get to that level of where you're revealing truth that tickles my funny bones. It's not funny to me. But white people have the freedom to do that. And then a lot of times they don't even talk about racism. White people are up on stage. They have other things on their mind. But what relationship does the comedy have to do with what was I was just talking about? Oh, well, why is this so funny? Because it does cut to the very bottom line. It does cut to the thing that nobody talks about. And it is like so funny. What comedians do is they notice things. They notice patterns about people that just are never mentioned. And to be able to, and they do impersonations of people because they are very observant of people. So they can take a particular person and they can do an impersonation because they've noticed all the details. Well, that's the way this is striking to me. That's why it's making me laugh, because it's like if there's a person who embodies the system of anti-blackness, or who embodies, it's like a composite non-black person who practices racism. This transcript is that composite, and it's almost like an impersonation of him, and it's hilarious to me. Even though it's very serious, part of it is maybe I'm laughing to keep from crying, but part of it is just because they're so frickin' predictable, and I enjoy seeing the impersonation that I'm seeing right here in this transcript. Yeah, so they're gonna surveil inner city federal clinics, but of course they prefaced it with nursing homes. All right, let's see what else they have for us here. I did it again, thinking I'm on my PDF and I'm in the studio. So they also talk about Native Americans, because a lot of people like to say Native Americans are in the same situation as we are, but I don't have time to go through all the data on the fact that it's a different situation. You're talking about people who've gotten into a behavioral pattern on the res, but most of them don't live on the res and they don't have anything close to the experience that black people have. But so they're talking about indigenous populations, and I'm talking about, it's interesting. I sometimes wonder if Donald Trump is playing at something here, if he knows that a lot of black people, or a lot more black people than people imagine, are quote unquote indigenous. Because nobody is really indigenous to any place on the planet. From what I understand. I know there are people who will disagree with me. I know that there are Australians who believe that humanity started in Australia. I know there are people here, particularly a lot of black people, Moors, who believe that humanity started in the Americas. Hey, maybe you have some information I don't have, but from everything I've seen, humanity started in Africa. So that there are no indigenous people in Europe. There are no indigenous people, from the strictest terms, in Asia or any of the Americas, Australia, or any place else. There are people who were there first, and if that's what we're calling indigenous, there are quite a number of black people who fall into that, as well as some Asiatic-looking natives. Kind of wide-ranging. You folks should have called in. I wouldn't be so wide-ranging. Let me see how many people have clicked off. Let's see if I should even keep going. Let me look in the studio and see who's looking. Had 8, down to 6. I don't know. Maybe for my own fun I'll do it. And then maybe I'll just listen to myself laughing. Let's see. Okay. All right, so let's finish this paragraph. To really be able to find the early alerts of asymptomatic individuals in the community, and both for the syndromic cases that are tested, syndromic cases, the flu, influenza-like cases, and the asymptomatic cases, doing contact tracing, again, contact tracing with the phones, with support from the Centers for Disease Control, Facebook, Google, Apple, doesn't say that, but we already know that's true, working with each state and local government and every possible corporation we could possibly think of. And they're going to cover the whole thing. Anything that looks like flu, we want to find you folks because we want to find the black people and find them and tell them that it's COVID. Okay, so now the only thing I highlighted here is sentinel surveillance. So let's see who sentinel surveillance is. Let's see what they are. Sentinel surveillance, immunization, vaccines, and biologicals. A sentinel surveillance system is used when high quality data are needed about a particular disease that cannot be obtained through a passive system. Selecting reporting units with a high probability of seeing cases of the disease in question. With a high probability of seeing cases of the disease in question. So if you've already set it up so that you know that there's a place where there are a lot of black people, and you know that has already been tagged, there have already been a lot of, if there are a lot of black people there, they have been tagged with COVID, and you know that they're going to continue to do that. So that's where you know, that's how you know, because they're making a decision to give it to you, not because you have it more, but just because they've decided that that is where they're going to diagnose it the most, whether or not you have it or not. So that's sentinel surveillance. And then they say, for example, a large network of large hospitals might be used to collect high quality data on various diseases, meaning some big hospital in Philly, Atlanta, New York, Brooklyn, Harlem, maybe MLK Hospital, where they're going to start making them do it. Back to the briefing, now that we know what sentinel surveillance is. I forgot to check to see if anybody's on the conference line. Let me see. Nope, nobody. Okay, so back to where I was, I guess. Oh, street dignitaries say keep going. Right on. Just because you asked me, street dignitary, I'm gonna do it. See? See how easy I am? See how little encouragement I need? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. No, just for you. Let me look at your name again. Street dignitary. I like that. Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right. Adobe Acrobat. Donald Trump. See if there's anything else. Let's at least use the little hand so we can go faster. Okay, here's Dr. Birx again. So there's a phase 1. I think there are 3 phases. So phase 1 begins with all vulnerable individuals, including those with comorbidities. Now, who have they told you are the people that have all the greatest number of comorbidities? All right, it's us. Continuing to shelter in place, meaning continue to be under the order of medical martial law. Because you got high blood pressure that has nothing to do with getting a respiratory disease, which is what COVID-19 is if it kills you. We know that because we've always had high blood pressure, and yet we're not dying from respiratory disease, which is what I explained in the last video. And ensuring that those that go first out into the public are not those that are most vulnerable to bad outcomes. So they're concerned about the ones who might get sick. You know who they say that is. So they can get it under the pretense. They can incarcerate us, put us under house arrest under pretense of concern for our health. But also remember, they're looking for people who are asymptomatic and who are carrying this thing and have had contact with those who've had the tag, they just get us coming and going. Now we're talking about going to work, which is very interesting because now this is like a 21st century version of a chain gang. So this is Dr. Birx again. If a vulnerable population needs to return to work and cannot be teleworking, there should be special accommodations for all vulnerable populations. Meaning the typical 43-year-old black person who has hypertension. Okay, I think it's a slight majority of black people over the age of 40 who have hypertension. And we don't have the kind of jobs that allow us the freedom to telecommute, generally. I do, but few people do. Few of my people do. So just the typical type, they're vulnerable and now they need to work. So you're gonna make, but now remember, you're supposed to be concerned that they're catching the thing. But you're going to make special accommodations for them to work. Doesn't that sound like a chain gang? But then that you say, but you have to minimize all non-essential travel. So, ninja, go to work and return to yourself. It's just like a chain gang. 21st century. And the chain gang, of course, was an extension of chattel slavery. They don't change. We want the governors with the data that they have. Here we go again, community by community. You know what that means. Zip codes where black people live. This is all very consistent. What's next? We critically have to have put in place what we believe is a safety net through asymptomatic sentinel. We know what sentinel surveillance is now. Through asymptomatic, so black people are coming into these clinics where they've been tagged either before or now or in the future to have a COVID-19 diagnosis that is purely a matter of discretion. It's a clinical thing, meaning a matter of discretion. There's no objective test for it. And even if there were, they're not using them for that many people. A safety net through asymptomatic sentinel surveillance, your cell phone, that is centered around our most vulnerable groups, read black people. They throw in nursing homes as a decoy and natives as a decoy, indigenous population. Isn't it interesting that they are differentiating between Native American and indigenous populations? We might be moving towards that video I did that said American descendant of slavery or Native American or both. Because why would you use both? Why would he say Native American and indigenous populations? We're just talking about inside the borders of the United States of America. Why would you use both of those terms? Y'all answer that for me. All you people who are so certain that every black person that is here in North America is a descendant of somebody who came in the transatlantic slave trade, you might have an answer. I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but you could shame me. Can you answer me why he would use both of these terminologies, Native American and indigenous populations, if they were one and the same? If the Native American that we normally think of is one and the same? Because if there is the Asiatic Native American and then there is the Black Native American that we see all over all kinds of maps and whatnot, you probably would need two different designations for that. You would need two different governmental terms for that, and you probably would not use racial terms. And anyway, here we go again with and our inner city groups. Over and over again, they're telling us how much they're targeting us. And then they say that we all, Native American, indigenous populations, and inner city, read black, that we live in multi-generational households. Yeah. You know the black guy who can't find a job. You know where he's living. With his auntie, with his sister, with his mom. His grandmother might be there too. I mean, on this street, I don't know how many times let's see, when I first moved on this street, there was a house that had the little girls that played with my daughter at the time had a mother who lived there. And then their grandmother lived there. And then their great-grandmother lived there. And then also some of the mother's cousins lived there. That's a very common thing. My ex-husband had a same situation, same kind of mix of people in there. Because we got to double up a lot. It's just like in The Color of Wealth. Do our best to just not be homeless, right? And then he says, I'll stop there. He says, well, they have a unique risk. I'll stop there, Mr. President. We have a unique opportunity to lock down 4 generations at one time. They're probably like can't, they probably want to go home and have sex with their wife or their husband over that. It's like, oh man, that's a cluster bomb. Usually you don't say bomb, He said he'll stop there, Mr. President. Okay, let's see what else they have. We have areas of the country that have gone through a terrible ordeal. No, we do not. None of the data shows that. Yes, we have areas of the country, not due to COVID. We have areas of the country who've been told that they have. Yeah. But anyway, what they're doing is they're differentiating the black areas from the non-black areas, and others that have fortunately have gotten through this rather lightly. I wonder if the pun is intended. So that's the first thing. What else do we have? Who's John? Who is John? John who? I don't know who that is. If I go back, I could find out who it is. But anyways, he was at the mic at this briefing, and so he said, "I assume that there's also a phase 4, which is after a vaccine is developed and available to everybody." Why would you assume something like that? You never got a vaccine for SARS, the first one. You never got a vaccine for H1N1, which is what the swine flu or the Mexican flu. Why would you assume that? And, Fauci said something that I didn't find particularly interesting as regards our particular interests as black people. So then you see Donald Trump talking about the places that everybody knows is white. Mark Furman from the glove fiasco in the O.J. Simpson trial. The one who said he never used the N-word and got caught doing it. Anyway, he lives in one of these big sky country states, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota. And that's a lot different than New York. Well, yeah, of course. Those are the white areas. So, part of it is that they're white, so they're not going to get tagged. But also part of it is that they have a low population density, which is where I would love to live. I would love to live in, that's my ideal topography. I like plains and rolling hills. That's beautiful to me. That's where I would live if there were not a thing called anti-blackness. But those people out there, the population of black people out there, I think that's less than 1%. And they ain't playing out there. That's why Mark Furman went there to live. So I don't get to live where I want to live. And it's relatively dry. I like places that are relatively dry but also have greenery. And I prefer lakes to oceans. But I don't want it to be cold like the Great Lakes up north. And, so maybe, I don't know, Montana maybe has a lot of snow. I know North Dakota does. But I'd like to be there in the spring. They take up all the good stuff. And I do actually like the ocean. They take up all that stuff too. They take up all the good real estate. So I'm left listening to ocean sounds on Alexa when I have it plugged in or on my phone or whatever. I would love to live someplace where I could just hear the ocean waves coming in. So here's our president, number 45. He said the same thing. We have a lot of states that through location, through luck, and also through a lot of talent earn a very, very good position, and they're getting ready to open. Almost near the end here. I doubt there's any more. We shall see. Don't want to miss anything. And when I'm done, when I get to the end of this, I'm going to check to see if anybody's called in. And I will check for comments too in the chat. Well. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's what he's just talking about, low population density in Wyoming and big sky country where all those white folks are. I don't see the other. Hello. Okay, so that's the end of that. That was the briefing. And it was right in line with what I projected in the video that premiered today. And Kofi asked that I upload how to stop black facing of COVID. He asked that I upload that PDF to a place that people could download it and then place it in the description of the last video. And I just want you to know that I did do that. I'm not going to go through this again because I just went through it a couple hours ago. But this document right here, if you want it, which explains what we can do as black people to stop it if you want it, just go to the video that was on a couple of hours ago, and in the description there's a link to it. Okay, so I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to just get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of this Who Sentinel thing because we just did that one. I remembered that during the last video, I wanted to get to the exact numbers of the comparison of how much television black Americans watch as compared to white people and Asians. And I said I couldn't find it, and I was looking right at it. I just didn't have it. It was actually, this particular document was right on the screen right when I was talking about it, but I didn't have it highlighted. So here it's highlighted. So it says, when it comes to traditional TV, African Americans tune in nearly 213 hours per month. That's a lot. Like, I just can't even imagine, because I don't watch TV. But I mean, I had done the math on that. Let's say 213 divided by 4. Actually, they're about 4.3 weeks in a month on average. That's 49 hours a week watching television. That's more hours than a person watching working full time. That's how much television black people are watching. That's like, that amazes me. Like, I mean, I know we got to do something. Like, I'm not blaming us. I'm just saying, let's look for the opportunity to do something different and better. And that's more than twice as much as Asians, and roughly 57 more hours than whites. And I think I said it was 50% more than whites. It's not. It's about, I'd done the math on that. I think it's like 40% more. That's still a lot. That's a big difference. Yeah. And the difference is that, and even if we were watching the same amount, the thing is, television is extremely anti-black. So white and non-black people consuming it is not the problem for them that it is for us, even if we were watching the same amount, but we're watching more of it. Can we do something about that? Can we cut it down to half each week? I don't watch it. Now, I do admit, I do have a few things that I like. You know, the series that I'll binge watch on Amazon and on Netflix. Every couple months or so, I'll find something that, you know, it's just pure entertainment for me. But I rather prefer, I like YouTube, like information. I'm an information junkie. Always trying to connect the dots. Always trying to get some new information that will help me increase my understanding of everything, you know. But that's just me, maybe. It doesn't have to be everybody. But what I do know is that you can find other things. You don't have to be an information junkie. You don't have to be a nonfiction junkie. What I do know is that you can take steps to, if entertainment is your thing, just just be really, really focused on watching entertainment that doesn't have a lot of non-black people in it. And when it's got black people in it, it doesn't have a lot of anti-black messaging in it. You can do that. I mean, or you could not. But if you're here, it seems like to me you probably have an interest in solving this problem of getting rid of this global system of anti-blackness. So, you know, and you're probably not a person who watches a lot of TV. Why do I have this one up here? Provisional death counts for corona. Because I went over this in the last video. Why do I have that here? I think it's because I wanted to show, I don't know, I thought it might come up in conversation. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk. Yeah. Okay, it was this last one where the expected deaths as of or for the week of April 11th was only 40% of what was expected from previous years, and that was just like unlike anything else above it. And so, of course, that was April 11th, and this was of April 15th, so that was only 4 days later. And so a lot of people will say, well, that 40% represents what's been reported. They just haven't had time to get it all in yet, which you could say about all the rest of these too, but that still wouldn't explain why they're so high. But what I wanted to say, and I haven't uploaded, by law in the state of New York, they have 72 hours to report a death, and it's done through an electronic database. This is, April 11th is more than 72 hours from April 15th. There's no reason for it to be this low unless they're trying to figure out what to do with the data. And on the other numbers, if you're going to say, well, they're still trickling in because there's some people who didn't meet that 72-hour deadline, and maybe it might stay at 92% here on this week or 94% on this week. or it might go a little above. But the thing is, if you've got a pandemic, if you've got an epidemic that has got bodies lined up in the street, even if you're only reporting 94% of the deaths that actually occurred, if you compare them to previous years, it should be well over 100% of the previous year. You see what I'm saying? So there's just no evidence in that there's any pandemic going on in the United States. Just the numbers just don't bear it up. Just from absolute deaths. Like I said, forget about from COVID-19. If there was a pandemic, and we're calling it COVID-19, that's got more people dying, excess deaths, we're just going to look at total deaths. And is it more than previous years? No, there's no evidence of that. I don't know why my screen just did that. Why did you just don't be shutting down on me now. Okay, well, I really don't have anything else. And if I go to my conference call line and nobody has called in, yeah, and no one has. Let me look and see what people are saying here in the chat. Back it up. I want to see. What did I miss? Okay. She said thank you, Oracle, if I had the energy. And so I did. Once I saw the keep going, I got re-energized. Neo reservations and TAMs. TAMs, that means Tamericans, which is a term that Oracle and I and a few people use. Kofi uses it to refer to black people who are native to the Americas. Now, we know that we originally came over here. At least, I don't know if Oracle agrees. But Kofi and I will agree that somewhere between 30 and 100,000 years ago, we came over here from Africa. But there are a lot of us who are native to the Americas, right? And even if we're not, let's just say that the people over here are that we call American descendants of slavery, or what we think of as native black Americans, been here at least 21 generations, meaning from the transatlantic slave trade going forward, even if you're not talking about being a Native American or an indigenous person, I should say. We call those Tamericans, and the reason we call them Tamericans is because Tamari, it is our belief from the evidence that Tamari, the beautiful land that the Egyptian empires, which was bicoastal, bicontinental, referred to, was in the West. It was over here in the Americas, and that the first Egyptian empires were the temples that you see here in the Americas, in Mexico and in other parts of Central America. And so Tamari, so Tamericans. So but we differentiate that from other black people who we federate we federate with them, and that we have a joint interest with all the black peoples of the world, not just in Africa, but in the Pacific Islands and wherever they are, even in India. We federate, we federate, but we're different. We have different interests, just like, white folks federate. Just like the United States, and Donald Trump was talking about, all the 50 states have different needs and different ways of going about different things. Now, we're all federated, but you got to allow for some differences too. Well, that's how we look at it. And so we look at ourselves as like a little nation state if we're talking about the Federation of the Global Black Collective, and we call ourselves Tamerica, or the Tamericans. And so when she uses the term TAM, that's what she means. So she said, TAMs have been talking about leaving America and living abroad in travel groups. They have videos on YouTube of black people living in Asia, Brazil, and Africa. They ain't trying to let us go. You're absolutely right about that. They're not fixing to let the goose that lays the golden egg for them go. Listen, I know what you're talking about in terms of entertainment, value that we bring. We are, like, rap is worldwide, and it's R&B. If we're not doing it, ain't worth anything. We're dance, we're all of that, we're sports, yeah, but we're not limited to that. And the reason I know that is because I grew up in a bedroom community of Edwards Air Force Base. And I just happened to live on the same block. It was mostly white folks, but about 4 doors down was a family that happened to have come to Lancaster from Virginia, just like we did. My dad went to college with the dad of that family. And the son in that family, we ended up being in the same gifted class with a bunch of white folks. But what I know, like, I was around, like, I know what happened at NASA. I know what the black creative output was at even just that NASA installation. What's called Dryden Research Center. I'm not sure if it's still called that. Like the really innovative stuff that has happened in government service, like that stuff, they depend on black folks. Why do you think Hillary Clinton had a black chief of staff? Every time they really need something done, they go and get a black person because they know black people are thorough and they know that we're innovative. You know, in technology, in administration, it is all these handicaps they put before us. We invented all kinds of stuff when we were enslaved, and then white folks took credit for it. They don't want to let us go. They ain't fitting to let us go. I got a job once. I know they didn't because I was already labeled as a troublemaker. You know, like someone who's looking out for black folks in a social service job, and an opportunity opened up for people who were doing what I was doing because I was making a career transition from being a high school teacher. And so I had, you know, really gone through some low paying jobs. And so here I was making I think I was making $11 an hour. And as an assistant to a social worker. And an opportunity, this county of San Diego put together this program where people who were doing what I was doing, which was like taking the young people out and seeing where their head was at and that type of thing. We had an opportunity to move into the positions of doing the jobs that the social workers were doing if we, you know, had a college degree and whatnot. But the competition for that, for those jobs there were like 80 people for every position that was available. And I had a reputation. They did not want me. They sure did take me. Because the thing is, it was a startup. And you would not believe the number of black people they hired. And it was really well paying. The reason they had 80 people for every position is because you went from making $11 an hour to like $35 an hour. Like it was a life changer. They knew who I was. They hired me anyway. Because they needed that program, because it was a flagship program for the county of San Diego. They needed it to be successful, and that's why they hired a lot of black people. And then once we got it going, then they started giving us a bunch of hard times. We ended up quitting or getting fired. When they want something done, whether it's in the social services, whether it's in technology, what have you, you know, certainly in entertainment, they know we're the golden geese. They're not finna let us go. What else is being said here? Television is an escape for a lot of people. Yeah, I know. It is for my sister. Like she says, I had at the time, he was a close associate. I would have called him a friend at that time. And one of the things I loved about him, Ron, shout out to you, that's your real name. I loved his that he wasn't ashamed of it. Like he would say, yeah, I literally grew up on television. I love television. He was a really smart guy, but he didn't try to hide that. And, you know, that's, my sister says, I have to have my TV. Like, anytime she calls me, I have to tell her, please turn your TV down. She calls me, you know, and the TV's up. And she says, yeah, I just, you know, I'm trying to get her used to the internet. She just won't do it. She says, gotta watch TV. The TV's got to be on all the time. It's her escape. You know, she loves television. And she's a boomer. But, you know, I guess younger people are the same way. That they watch, what is it, Wives of Atlanta or Wives of Hip Hop, whatever. Right? You know, I know it's an escape. So I'm not going to try to blame us. Yeah, and it's free. Yeah, well, it's not really free anymore. Can you get quality television without cable now? Oracle? You really can't. It's not really free, is it? Like, I'd rather... you know, I mean, if you're going to pay, why not pay for internet instead of cable? Now, they try to get you to have both. But I've been in so many black households. The TV's just TV in every room. And then on top of it, everybody's looking at their phone. But the thing is, the television really gets me because I can see how anti-black it is. I, for a while, was doing some traveling. And, you know, I hadn't had a television in my house for a really long time. Like, I just haven't since... Well, that's not true. My daughter has a television, which is a whole different thing. If you want me to explain it later, I will. But I mean, I don't watch television. I do have a large screen TV, but the only thing I use it for is it's my computer display. So I have it hooked up HDMI. But I used to travel, and I would be in hotel rooms when I'd be traveling, and I would be like, well, I haven't watched TV in so long. There's nothing. I don't have any work to do. Let me turn on the TV. I would try it. I'd like tried it 4 or 5 different times. I can't watch it. I'm watching it. So this the stilted, um, clearly being presented to me as to the world as the standard of beauty of these white women who have these, to me, okay, to me, they have these hard looking faces, they have this limp hair, and they're very phony with their laughter, they're very phony with their femininity, and and the banter going on between the white guy and the black guy, and then all the anti-black silly stupid humor on the sitcoms. I really tried, but I like the TV in the hotel room stays on about 15 minutes when I turn it on. 1 out of 5 times I'm in a hotel room. Like once you wean yourself off of it, you really like, I don't think you could go back. But yeah, they just don't strike me as I don't know how to explain it to people. They do not strike me. I don't have any problem. I don't have to exercise any self-control in being attracted to white men. I don't have to exercise any stuff going on in my head to make me feel like I'm attractive compared to non-black women or white women. It's like, it's really obvious, that Americans are like, just to me, okay, which is healthy even if it's not true. Like, there's no comparison. If you take the most attractive American and quote unquote the most attractive white woman or non-black woman, like there's no comparison. And then all the way down the line. So if you take a 10 American and a 10 white woman, okay, I guess, like, come on, we're in a different universe. And you can go all the way down from 9s, 8s, all the way down to 2. So yeah, I don't see it, but it's because I separated myself from television so long ago. Let's see. Social media. Yeah, social media is a pastime now. I will admit to that. Mea culpa. Yeah, it is for me. Like, I was addicted to Facebook for a lot of years. Like, that was my social network. That's, that was my pastime. And I would, like, mostly post about racism and stuff. And I was, like, there came a time after a few years where I was like, but I want to be able to post these funny things that people are talking about in their personal lives too. But I felt like, it'll ruin my brand. And I can't disclose the kinds of things about my personal life that other people do. I was like, I wish I could. I could start up a new account, I guess, and get personal, I guess, and try to tell funny stories. But I have other kinds of work to do. So, like, it's like what Neely Fuller said, even though he's not a black man. But he said, like, one of the things he's another one. Now, I'll tell you, Neely Fuller makes me laugh. He's not a comedian, but he would have me doubled over in laughter, and he would be completely serious, right? So one of the things he would say is, I don't have any hobbies. This is what I do. I talk about racism, white supremacy. I don't have any hobbies. And I guess that's what I've turned into. I do have some things I'm interested in, but I'm always trying to put together a worldview, and ultimately it's to solve the problem of my particular subjugation as a black person, as a black American, as a black American woman. But basically, like, yeah, those are my hobbies. I'm an informational junkie. I'm interested in a whole lot of stuff, but but a lot of it is very useful in terms of understanding this thing, the way patriarchy, because there's a thing called patriarchy, and that exists in every single creature. It's not just humans. It's not a construct. It's the male dominance hierarchy for access to women. But I digress. So that was my hobby, and I'm no longer addicted to Facebook. Like, I'm hardly ever on there anymore. I'm freed. But there was a time when I just had to click on to see what was on Facebook, like the click thing. What are my notifications today? Yeah, I was like really addicted, but I'm no longer addicted to that. And I never did get addicted to Twitter. I don't know why. I guess once I got over my addiction to Facebook, like, it's just Twitter's like a lower version to me of Facebook, because it's just so short, and it's also some very violent the way people interact. The interaction on Twitter is so much more verbally violent than Facebook. So, like, nah. I use it for informational purposes and to try to tweet to people who are important, things that I think that I wish they'd change their minds about, basically. Or to reinforce people who are saying things that I like. But, like it's not going to kill me if I don't get on Twitter in a week. What did you say? Oh, you said they still have. You talked about inventions they steal from us, yeah, and they're still doing it. They're still stealing. Like they're stealing the intellectual work that Black women and Black people do on social media, and claim ownership of it, and then they tour around the country like Tim Wise and make 6 figures, probably 7 figures. And to this day they are stealing our technical inventions. They're still doing it. Regular television. Do people really use the rabbit ears anymore? Do people use, I didn't even know that anybody did that anymore. Are people still doing that? I didn't know that. What did you say about your sister? You said your sister doesn't have cable? Oh. And there are a lot more options now than from the early 2000s, but I don't know how many channels are on regular television. Oh. I didn't know. Okay. TV has watered down, Street Dignitary says TV has watered down Blackness. Aha, yeah. This is the latest thing, right, is Black AF, I'm going to curse for, because that's Black as fuck, right? That's the new thing. And they've got Rashida Jones, who's played white women her entire career, but somehow they've teased up her hair or something or tinted her skin so that she looks like she's mixed. Yes, TV is re-representing Blackness to be non-Black people because you have to... where is the point when you titrate, it's like what, I don't want to use Malcolm X, but whatever. So if you have tea and lemonade, you got a glass of tea and you're adding lemonade or to the pot, to the pitcher. At what point does the amount of lemonade that you added to the tea make you say that's no longer tea? You might not say it's lemonade yet. But at some point, there's a level where you'd say, this is not tea anymore. It's tea-ish, like the television show Black-ish. So they just came right out and said Black-ish. We're not doing black no more. We're not doing KCET. Was that it? What was the channel that had all the black programming in the 90s? We ain't doing that no more. We'll give you ish. We ain't doing black no more. We ain't doing it. We ain't doing no more Bernie Mac. We ain't doing it. We'll give you some ish-ish. We'll give you ish. Not going to give you black. Except that if you will accept our new definition of black as a non-black person, a person who's so watered down, we may not accept them as well. Now, and we've gotten to the point now where we're even going to call people who have been accepted as white, played white roles, Rashida Jones, her whole life, we're going to call her black as fuck. See? You got me to the point where I'm actually saying that word. I won't say it very often. But it would sound rather silly, right? If that's the name of the television program or series, and I'm still saying, I'm still being a prude and I refuse to use the curse word. That to me, that's not even being articulate. I think there's a certain amount of cursing you have to do. Curse words, if they're used with the proper emphasis, is part of being an articulate person, I think, in any language. Oh, UPN, yeah, that's what it was. It was UPN that was the black network in the 90s. That's it. Yeah, they ain't doing that no more. And they're cracking down. They want to know what we're doing because they know that with a cell phone, you can do an amazing amount of coding. Now, I could say something. I'm always thinking about, if I say this, will this get my channel shut down? But let me see if you guys can figure out what I'm saying without me actually saying it. And it's still okay. So what makes all this technology, all this wireless technology work? It's not just the cell phones, not just the towers, right? What makes it work are the cables underneath the ocean and the satellites that orbit the Earth, right? And what communicates with those things? The computers down here. This is why Sophia Stewart was sent. She was sent that message when she wrote The Matrix, and she did write it. So It's very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable system. It's like when they have the suns, the what is it called, the sunstorms. Like I forget. There's a term for it, and it can take out entire communication networks. So and utilities for like 10 states at a time, because it's very fragile. So that's a natural phenomenon in which that could happen. But if a very poor girl or boy in Chicago or Lagos, Nigeria, or somewhere in Durban, South Africa, has this very powerful device called a smartphone, which they now want to use to track us. If they're really good at it, they can hack it so they can't be tracked, and they might be able to do something like a sun. And then what will they do? And are we prepared for when that happens? But it might level the playing field. And you might not even have to take, you understand what I'm saying? I don't want to say anymore. So, yeah, I see that there are 16 concurrent viewers and I only got 6 likes. You guys are not generous people. Those of you who liked it, thank you very much. The other 16, come on. If you're here and you're listening to me, couldn't you just click the like button? Couldn't you just do that? Couldn't you like what is it to just click the like button? Like, you have to be like, that's not generous at all. Like, it's not, what is it to you? And it would mean so much to me. Why couldn't you do that? Well, I'm checking one more time to see if anybody called in. Anyone wants to actually talk. Nope, nobody does. So I have nothing more. How long have I been going? I'll look in my studio and see how long I've been talking. An hour and 12 minutes. I didn't think it would go that long. But I do thank all of you who did listen, who did tune in. And I hope you will go back and listen and watch, when you whatever it is, your I don't know, whatever you imbibe that makes your life, makes you have an enjoyable hour, whether that is a 9.6% beer, a little gin, as long as you're not an alcoholic, legal cannabis. Edible cannabis is my drug of choice because it gives me a psychedelic experience. I know exactly how to do it scientifically. But maybe you could do that and then tune into the 2 hours and 12 minutes video that I did premiered earlier today, because I think it's got really important information in it, and you might actually enjoy it. You might have a psychedelic experience. The guy that introduced me to counter-racim, who's now deceased, the late David Hugo Borman, he said that when he listened to Jimi Hendrix, because he was one of those weird ends, I tended to like them. If I were to continue dating at this point, I'd kind of worn off. That's worn off. But he said that when he listened to Jimi Hendrix, when he was on LSD or when he was on shrooms, this is long before I ever took any of that stuff, and I still haven't, because edible cannabis, because the way cannabis is metabolized by the liver in a way that it produces cannabinoids that you won't get by smoking it. And if you take a certain dose of it and you have not taken any other psychoactive pharmaceuticals, it can give you an experience that's just like taking shrooms. And I think it's made me smarter. Haven't done it in a while. But anyways, David said that, did I finish that? That when he listened to Jimi Hendrix when he was on shrooms, it was like a zipper being open to the universe. So, I don't think that what I say is going to be, is that important, but I do believe it's important, and I think that just maybe in an altered state of consciousness, you might actually enjoy it, as well as it being informative and helpful for your life and the life of your loved ones. With that being said, I am going to sign out. This has been, you know how I do it. This has been the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer for April 17th, 2020. Signing out. Stay safe. Stay away from them hospitals. Be careful what you say to them doctors. Enjoy your time off, Black people. You deserve it. You need it. Try to get the most you can out of it, and maybe even profit off of it. Good night.